In today's show, we're talking trade rumors, what the market looks like as we barrel towards the February 9th trade deadline in the NBA. Plus, Blazers got a 6-game homestand they got to take advantage of. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You're listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making the show your first listen every day. Free on all platforms, Monday through Friday, coming at you every single weekday. So start your days with it and tell your friends to do the same. Make it your first listen. It's Locked On Blazers, your team every day. In today's show, I have gone to the rumor mill and bathed my hands in the healing waters of NBA trade rumors. I'm going to come bring you the latest from around the league, the latest scuttlebutt, the latest whispers happening ahead of the trade deadline. We're about 3 weeks out from the NBA's February 9th trade deadline. I want to talk about why there may or may not be a bunch of movement ahead of this deadline. That we will discuss that in the second segment. And then the Blazers kick off a 6-game homestand on Thursday. We've been talking about this January being a chance to take advantage of a soft schedule. It's here. It's no longer hypothetical. It's here. We'll talk about that final homestand of January to close the show. But let us start with the full Brian Windhorst fingers. Let us start. If you're watching on the YouTube, you got to see me do the full Windy. If you're listening on the audio, just imagine Brian Windhorst doing that. Now, why would they do that face? Let's start with the latest rumors. This is to me, this is important. Let me just a little nerd caveat up top. To me, who reports it is important. I think to the general public, it is less important. But, I used to be a full-time journalist as my profession, and who got the scoop matters in that world. Journalists are really self-important and annoying. So I'm going to try to do my best to give credit to the people who did the real reporting, because the real reporting is kind of what fuels the whole NBA ecosystem, allows me to do this podcast, yada, yada, yada. So first, Jared Weiss of The Athletic reported today in The Athletic that the asking price, the Boston Celtics, their championship level team, they're kicking around how they can upgrade the roster, and reportedly within that reporting that you can read on The Athletic, the asking price from the San Antonio Spurs for big man Jakob Poeltl is 2 first-round picks. That's a lot. Jakob Poeltl's really good. I'm a big fan of Jakob Poeltl. Underrated passer, excellent rebounder, excellent rim protector, has a lot of moves and some good touch right around the rim. 2 first-round picks for him is a bunch, but that's the asking price for the Spurs, who are after it to be bad. And if a team wants Poeltl, who's long been thought of as a guy who's absolutely going to have a change of scenery, for right now, the asking price is 2 firsts. Speaking of a long-rumored player who could be on the market, James Edwards at The Athletic, Detroit Pistons beat reporter, late last week, reported that Bojan Bogdanovic is available, and there's teams that have been asking. Pretty much every team with playoff aspirations has at least called, if not championship-level aspirations, has at least called to say, hey, what's it going to take to get Bogey out of Detroit? Bogdanovic has been awesome. Career year is just dude's a bucket. He was a bucket in Utah. He was a bucket in Indiana. But he's been really good for a bad Pistons team. He's way older than their core. It's hey, this doesn't fit with the rest of the roster. Except he could just be on their team next year and it wouldn't be a big deal. But reportedly, according to James Edwards, at a minimum, the price for Bojan Bogdanovic is an unprotected first-round pick. No protections on that bad boy. Make the salary work to get Bojan. Unprotected first-round pick. That seems to be a theme with these bad teams. They want just the picks to make it happen. No protections on the picks. No maybes. No nothing. Unprotected first-round picks. Give it up. Mark Stein, who's been really making it happen with a trade rumor reporting over at his newsletter, The Stein Line, available on Substack by subscription, reports that Cam Reddish, former number 10 overall pick, traded to the Knicks, kind of never found a position with the Knicks, is on the block. It could be traded for second round draft compensation. Obviously, you're going to have to make the salary work. Cam Reddish makes about $6-7 million a year, but second round draft compensation. Reddish is mostly like a theoretically good player. He was a pretty good defender as a young player with the Hawks. He just hasn't been able to find a role with the Knicks. There's a chance there's still a good player in there, and for a second round pick, probably worth kicking the tires. For the Blazers purposes, probably not my preferred choice, but he's like, I think he's not very good. It would be my guess, is that like not working out in 2 stops prior to the end of your rookie contract is like an indicator that you're not very good. If 2 teams guess right, or 2 teams believe something, it might be right. We kind of got to trust NBA folks on this sometimes, but certainly a highly recruited high school player. Yeah, it's probably NBA talent, at least NBA wing size in there. Would be curious to kick the tires if the price is right. According to Stein, Dallas, Milwaukee, and the Los Angeles Lakers have all inquired about acquiring Cam Reddish from the Knicks. If Cam Reddish ends up a Maverick, that'd be pretty fun, because Cam Reddish was, of course, the extra pick that the Hawks traded in the Luka Doncic for a Trae Young swap. With that extra pick, they took Cam Reddish. That would be really, really something. Also, according to Stein, is that the Clippers have some interest in Michael Conley, as long as we're continuing our trend of players who many thought at the beginning of the season absolutely would have new homes. 34-year-old Michael Conley with the Utah Jazz. I think it was assumed early on that the Jazz were going to tear it down. Then they've been kind of good, so they've been hesitant to tear it down. The Clippers, who sort of don't have a point guard, except the thing that they don't need is a point guard, but maybe they think they need a point guard. What they need is more people who can drive to the rim. Not sure Mike Conley's that, although he's still pretty crafty and talented, although he's certainly removed from his peak of his talents, but still pretty darn solid as far as 34-year-old point guards go. Clippers have expressed interest in Michael Conley. The Jazz, for their troubles, still on the trade market, and they have expressed interest in the long-rumored to be traded John Collins. It is closing in on 3 years, maybe, of the John Collins being on the trade block. Atlanta Hawks power forward, who was at once like a budding all-star type player, got a giant contract, and has just turned out to be like a okay starting level-ish forward. Big, I think, is probably a better way to describe his position. He's like a pretty good big man who's paid like better than he is. But the Jazz have expressed interest in John Collins, and Mark Stein floated the idea that there could be a 3-team trade. I believe there wasn't an idea. This is like some reporting that there's been some sort of mixing and matching among some teams, that a reported 3-team, sort of the bones of a 3-team deal that could send John Collins to Utah, could send Malik Beasley to Cleveland, and then the sort of obvious salary match for Cleveland in that scenario would be Karis LeVert, although there's some stalling on the Jazz side because they want draft compensation for taking on John Collins' big contract, because Atlanta is desperate to get off him. That's the theme. Teams want draft compensation. They want first rounders to make it happen. Other scuttlebutt out there, Yahoo's Jake Fisher reported that Miami has expressed interest in D'Angelo Russell. Jake Fisher had a great story with D'Angelo Russell. It's basically just like, if you could trade me if you want, but it's you're screwing it up if you can't take advantage of my talent. Like an incredible quote. There's swearing in there that I've edited out, but like incredible quote from D'Lo. Good reporting from Jake Fisher. The Heat have at least looked into what a trade for D'Angelo Russell might look like. If you're trading for D'Lo and you're the Miami Heat, the money that works and the obvious trade sort of chip that you would have to include to make it work is Kyle Lowry. The question is, would Minnesota want Kyle Lowry, who still has more money left on his deal and is older and has aged? He's just gotten older. Would that be something they're interested in, depending on kind of where they're at in the make the playoff cycle of their pursuit of a postseason berth? But that's D'Angelo Russell is another name that's sort of people thought could be moved because he's not long from Minnesota one way or the other. And Shams Charania of The Athletic has reported today, that's on Wednesday, January 18th. You were listening to Thursday, January 19th show. But Shams reported today that the Wizards are shopping Rui Hachimura, former lottery pick. I like Rui as like a bench piece. I think he can score. I don't think he can really do anything else, but scoring is the most important skill in the league. I think he's pretty decent at scoring on his own. At some point, he'll learn about teammates and passing, but for now, he's a dude who looks at the rim when he gets the ball. That reporting from Shams tracks with something that Mark Stein had previously reported, is that the Wizards maybe not interested in trading Kyle Kuzma, another name that people thought Kuzma's entering free agency this summer, and the sort of prevailing wisdom was that Kuzma would get moved, right? That the Wizards would move him for something as opposed to fear losing him in free agency. But the Wizards maybe will trade Rui Hachimura, or at least considering trading Rui Hachimura, clearing up that forward room and allowing them to keep Kyle Kuzma. That is your latest scuttlebutt, your latest whispers, your latest rumors from the mill in the league. What I want to do in the second segment is talk about why this might be a quieter trade deadline than certainly I had hoped. You had hoped. Who doesn't love trades? Let's talk about that in the second segment. But first, let me tell you about Built Bar. It is the protein bar that I have been enjoying in my own home for closing in on 3 years, telling you about it on the program for basically all of that time. I like them because they're sweet, covered in 100% chocolate, but they still pack a punch. On average, 17 grams of protein and 130 calories and just 4 net carbs. But in the past, this was an online-only product available at Built.com, but now the great news is you can go buy them at Walmart and Sam's Clubs. Yes, indeed, the retailers owned by the Walton family, Walmart and Sam's Club, are selling Built Bars now. So you can go buy a 4-pack, find out if the cookies and cream bars I've been telling you about for years are really that good, and if you really enjoy them or you want to try other flavors, you can go back to the local Walmart and purchase a 13-pack box, the big box of Built Bars. Find out what you like, get more from there. Listen, they taste great. They pack a punch. Find out if I've been telling the truth all these years. Go to your local Walmart or Sam's Club and check out Built Bar. All right. So we have reported all of the butt that has been scuttled across the league, all of the whispers, all of the rumors, whatever your preferred trade chatter euphemism is. I guess I didn't do the chatter. Let's call it chatter. I chatted the chatter in the first segment. I want to talk about what this trade deadline might look like. One thing is, like, I didn't mention the Portland Trail Blazers. I think they are going to make a move. The thing is, I don't think they're going to make a big splash. Joe Cronin basically has said as much, that like the big trade probably won't come at the trade deadline. It doesn't really make sense to punt on the Damian Lillard, Anthony Simons pairing after 50 games. Probably doesn't make sense to punt mid-season. All of these obvious things. Like if they're going to make the big trade, it probably makes more sense to do it in the summertime. Something I've said on the podcast, something Joe Cronin has basically out and out said. He made an appearance on the Jack Ramsey's podcast very early in the season and essentially said, we're going to make a trade in the summer. But he also said, we are unfinished. Like the moves are coming. I think the Blazers are going to make a trade. Small, albeit small, whether it's Justice Winslow or a Josh Hart type of wing that's entering free agency this summer that the Blazers need to flip, or if it's a young guy at the end of the bench like Keon, or whatever it might be. Like the Blazers are $67,000 from the tax line. They are not going to make a sort of mid-level trade, a low-level trade, and go into the tax. So they're going to save money, but they don't need to get out of the tax, which helps them. They just need to not take on more money than they send out. I assume the Blazers will do something. They're going to do something. I would put it at like 99% chance, maybe higher. We'll say 99 though. They're going to do something. They will make a move at the trade deadline. I'm certain of it based on the public comments from the guy who makes the trade calls. I don't know if he makes the trade calls. From the lead decision maker in the Blazers front office, Joe Cronin. But I'm not sure there's big fireworks coming around the league. All of sort of the reporting suggests that like the asking price remains high. 2 first-round picks for Jakob Poeltl, a fully unprotected first-round pick for Bojan Bogdanovic. If you're going to trade John Collins, you got to attach a pick to him to send him out. Like the ask remains high for even the most obvious sort of trade chips. The Pacers have been holding on to Miles Turner and refusing to trade him to the Lakers unless they include 2 first-round picks in the deal. Like it's the ask remains high, and I think in part that is because of the Rudy Gobert trade. When the T-Wolves traded for Rudy Gobert, they overpaid, and because they overpaid, everyone else says, okay, if Rudy Gobert is worth 5 first-round picks or like swaps and picks, right? If it's 5 picks changing hands in the deal, my guy's worth 2. Like, he's not Rudy Gobert. Rudy Gobert is one of the best defenders of his generation. 3-time defensive player of the year and all that. Like, yeah, my guy isn't Rudy Gobert. Our guy isn't Rudy Gobert, but sure, if he's 40% of Rudy Gobert, 2 draft picks, period, or unprotected. You cannot lottery protect this pick into the future, this unprotected pick, because listen, what the most recent big deal on the market, the splash deal in the market, that's it kind of reset or broke, or however you want to phrase it, these sort of trade talks. I think the Rudy Gobert package kind of wonkied up the market a little bit. Wonkied? Is that a word I'm using on the podcast now? It wonkied up the market. Also, I think in general, the play-in tournament, where there's 10 teams that are going to play a postseason game, if not multiple postseason games, it has naturally limited the market for sellers. In the past, by the time you get to the trade deadline, even in the NBA where more than half the league makes the playoffs, thered still be 8 teams or whatever who are like for sure out of it, need to tear it down and get out of here. There's just a much wider swath of teams like the 13th place Los Angeles Lakers or 12th place Los Angeles Lakers who are like, no, we're buyers. We're going to make the playoffs. If they were 12th in an 8-team playoff field like it used to be, they'd be like, how the heck are we going to get to 8th? We got to bail. Like, we got to bail. We got to head the other direction. That the play in and the tantalizing chance to make the postseason while finishing 9th or finishing 10th has changed the number of sellers on the market. There just aren't not going to be just naturally less sellers, and that means less sellers. Then it is not a great market for folks looking to buy cheap or buy in the middle. It's like you got to pay a premium if you want to be a buyer in that type of market, because there are just so few teams that are truly selling off parts because things are different. And there's few teams selling off parts because the lottery odds have been flattened. It happened in 2019 where they made the lottery odds where the top 3 teams get the same pick, the same percentage chance to get the top pick, and they flattened the odds behind them. So there was just less incentive to be truly bad, because the difference in 1 and 3, while it is different still because of the because you can't drop out of the top 3, et cetera, it's not as aggressive as it used to be. It's not as dramatic as like, we gotta get to 1 because 4 is so much worse. 4 is worse, but it's not as bad as it used to be. And the difference between finishing 7th and 9th in the lottery is narrower. The gap is narrower such that there is less incentive to truly bottom out. Plus, you can't fake the funk bottoming out anymore. There's no such thing as halfway crooks and tanking. You got to be bad from the beginning, like San Antonio and Houston. You got to go after it because you're not catching those teams. You can't get bad like them. It's hard. It is truly hard because of the parity in the middle of the league. If you pull the cord at you say, okay, we're going to truly bottom out at the trade deadline, you have to, or the second half of the season, you have to do something like the Blazers did last year, where they sat everybody. They started filling up the injury report with little bruises and bumps and making sure none of their good players played. They added 10 guys on hardship waivers through the end of the season. They lost 21 of 23, and they still didn't get into the top 5 worst records in the league. Like, you can't fake the funk in this era. There's no such thing as halfway crooks in this tanking era, depending on which outdated reference you prefer there. So I think that is going to affect sort of the level of activity. And finally, there's just no obvious domino. Sometimes at the trade deadline, it's like, okay, well, once James Harden moves, all of the other teams that are holding their pieces for the James Harden stuff will get in line. Once Ben Simmons moves, that'll be the domino. There's no obvious domino. There's no okay, once, there's not like if D'Angelo Russell gets traded, all of a sudden the pipes will burst, right? There doesn't seem to be that necessarily. Some trade will happen. It will set the sort of asking price, reset the market, et cetera, et cetera. But what team wants to be the team that resets the market? Some team that's like Celtics level, where it's like, we're making a deal because we believe we can win the championship in a couple months, is going to be the team that has to reset the market. These sort of mid-range teams aren't going to do that. It's going to have to be a true title chaser that resets the market, because there's no obvious, hey, trade me, I'm stuck here domino that's going to trade things or change things. Like, Even Jay Crowder holding out from Phoenix for the entire season. He's going to end up holding out 50 games from the Suns. They're not holding out, not playing by mutual agreement, sent home and hanging out in Atlanta by mutual agreement with the team. It's like he's going to have missed 50 games. Even a Jay Crowder trade that we've been waiting on since October, that's not going to, the faucet will not all of a sudden be on once Jay Crowder gets traded. But at some point it will be, but there's no obvious domino, no obvious thing that's going to break the dam that's going to sort of start it off. So I don't expect major moves at the deadline. Based on all of the reporting, it's kind of based on the sort of logic around the league, it's going to be minor stuff. And minor stuff means that the Blazers can be involved because they're not going to be a big splash type team. But it means that there might be less action, and less action is less fun for podcasters and fans who are podcasters. All right, let's talk about the Blazers homestand. They play 6 straight games at home, starting Thursday against the Philadelphia 76ers. It's now or never for them. Let's talk about that in the third segment. But first, I want to tell you that this episode is brought to you by BetOnline. It's the fastest and easiest way to bet on all of your sports action. Whatever that sports action is, you can find it there. The NFL playoffs, they really get rolling now that we're out of the first round into a really fun weekend ahead here in the NFL. If you want to get in on that action, you want to get on the NBA, it's happening every night. NHL happening every night. Soccer back and rolling, so you can get in on some soccer action if you're into the European soccer world. You want to bet on MLB futures? Well, we're a month out from pitchers and catchers reporting, 74 days from opening day. It's time to get in on that action as well. Tennis, you got the Australian Open rolling along. So listen, it's all there. Go to BetOnline. Take advantage today. That's BetOnline, where the game starts. Still a pass first point guard. Still Mike Richmond. And you are still listening to Locked On Blazers. Okay, we talked trades. Now let's talk actual Blazers basketball. They play a basketball game Thursday against the Philadelphia 76ers, who are good again. Joel Embiid back and healthy and playing like MVP caliber basketball. James Harden kind of still running effective pick and rolls with him in the middle of the floor. Tyrese Maxey back and healthy, and they're 8-3 since he's returned. The team, they're just good. They're one of the very good teams in the league, an elite top 5 defense. Their offense is in the top 10. Like, they're good. They're a good, they are just a competitive basketball team. That's a tough one. That's Thursday. It gets easier after that. Following Thursday's game against Philly, Sunday against the Lakers, a home back-to-back, Monday against the Spurs, then next Wednesday against the Utah Jazz, followed by Saturday against the Toronto Raptors, and then Monday against the Atlanta Hawks. 6 games, all at home. No more road games until February. They follow that 6-game homestand with a 3-gamer to Memphis, Washington, and Chicago. But this home set, this home stand with 6 games at home, it's now. I did a whole podcast, a whole episode about how the schedule was soft, and it was explicit. I think I said it once in the episode, but like it implied there and implicitly and explicitly within the schedule is soft is it's a chance to take advantage, and if you don't, it's troublesome. We've reached the if part. If the Blazers do not take advantage in these games, there's no, hey, but the schedule is getting easier. Oh, on the horizon, there's still a chance to pick it up. They won those 2 games against Dallas, super shorthanded Dallas team, and it was like, listen, they snapped a 5-game losing streak. They haven't been very good. Like, they've played maybe 6 weeks of basketball just like without ripping off a bunch of wins. They have not been a very good basketball team for a long time. And even with all that, they're still in the mix. Well, if they come out of this 6-game homestand and they're not an above 500 team, I don't think we can keep saying, okay, they're in a good spot because they no longer have that sort of benefit of the doubt that there's, home-heavy games. Right out of the All-Star break, they still play a bunch of home games, but March is super road-heavy. It is going to get more challenging. They've pretty much proved that they're a bad road team, and they are like okay at home. Well, this is a chance to be a little bit better than okay at home. I think they have to go 4-2 on this homestand. 3-3 is probably not good enough because you'll still end up below 500. Like, I think at a minimum you have to go 4-2. Let's say Thursday's game against Philly is a very hard. Like, you have like a 20% chance to win. I haven't looked at the predictors or whatever, but just off the top of my head, call it a 20% chance to win. Seems unlikely. Then of those 5 remaining games, you got to go 4-1. The Lakers are not good. They're not bad, but they're not good. San Antonio, awful. You have to win that game. You lose to the Spurs, that's like a huge like siren level loss. Utah is flirting with 500 as I'm recording this game. They're still playing, so they could be 500 by the time you hear this podcast. Toronto is just beat the Blazers in a game where they took over in the fourth quarter, but they're a below 500 team that's an absolute mess. Their defense has just totally fallen off, and their offense in the half court is bad. You got to find a way to win that game. And Atlanta, they were losing in the fourth quarter when I hit record on this one. So they're either just below or just above 500. But like, they're a mediocre basketball team too. After Philly, those are all winnable games. They're also all losable games. And that's where it worries me for the Blazers, because they have not always this year won the TCB games, won those taking care of business games. Those 2 losses to Oklahoma City still haunt this podcaster, because that was the first 2 games where I was like, oh, maybe this team isn't good. Because, you lose to OKC once, sure, that's a problem. You come back and lose to them a second time, that's a problem. You come back from that trip and lose to Orlando at home, okay, these are the TCB wins. These are just beat lottery teams. Beat lottery teams. And if you can't beat good teams, it doesn't matter, because you'll still be in the playoffs and you'll just have the sobering reality of the playoffs when you get there. But if you can't beat lottery level teams, you can't beat teams that are on the edge of the playoffs or just out of the playoffs, which these, debatably these teams, other than like, everyone is edge because of the way the play-in works, except for San Antonio, the worst team in the league by a pretty wide margin in terms of point differential. They're super bad. They're worse. They're like notably worse than Houston. That's how bad they are. Shout out to Houston. If you don't do it now, if you don't go 4-2 on this homestand, and that starts with a really tough game against Philly, the optimism that I've been able to find after games where I say, you know what? Even if they lose to Denver's better than them. That's okay. You just take care of business. If they don't take care of business, the optimism that I've drummed up, I feel like it really fades. This is the no more if part of the schedule, because it's like, if they take advantage of the games in January, they'll be in a good spot. This is the if. It's here. Over the next week, 10 days, they need to win these basketball games, because if they don't, and they're still below 500 going into that road trip and going into the All-Star break, then they're in a scramble. And they're not talking, like, they're in striking distance to be a team that takes care of these games and is like, oh, hey, we're still a game out of 5th heading into the break. So whatever happens in the final 22 games or 24 games after the break, like, we are in control of becoming a team that misses the play-in, or avoids the play-in rather. If they don't, they're a team, they all of a sudden switch to the other side. We are a team that's scrambling to make the play-in. Scrambling to make the play-in is not it's not a failure of a year. It's kind of where I think a lot of people thought this team might be. But what it is a reality in which the strides the team seemed to make early in the season, that they spent most of the year regressing to the mean or below it. And I think that's the frustrating part. They don't have to do that. We don't have to talk about regression yet. We can talk about this. Take advantage of these next 6 games. Put yourself in the position that you've earned to be in by treading water to this point. Win some home games. Head into February rather, feeling like, hey, we're not that bad. We've won 4 out of our last 6, or 5 out of our last 6 if they really get hot. We're a team that can be good, and we've already played like it. And then you'll have a stretch that is truly proof of concept. Early in the season, the first 2 weeks of the year, the Blazers had a stretch, 3 weeks really, of the year. The Blazers had a stretch where that was proof of concept. They haven't had that since then, that 10-14 start. This could be a chance to say, hey, Gary Payton's back in the lineup. Nazir Little's back in the lineup. The rotations are much more similar to what they're going to be if we play postseason games. This is what we're going to look like, and we're good because of the following. This 6-game stretch is a chance for them to prove it. Starts with a really tough one on Thursday, and we will talk about that one in Friday's show. So come back for that. It's a it's a daily podcast, 5 days a week, coming at you every single weekday. So thanks for making it your first listen. How about your second listen? You listen to Locked On NBA, Locked On Game to Game NBA. It's available on the Locked On NBA feed. It's all of the biggest games, highlights, players, performances from the local experts covering their team and their market. And nobody else, this is why Locked On special, nobody else can do what we do. So check out Locked On NBA Game to Game, wherever you get podcasts and also on the Odyssey app. I appreciate you listening. Come back for Friday's show. I'll talk to you soon.